manufacturer. The manufacturer's in Canada, so one of the questions that we've gotten is about sales tax. Since it's an international order, we order the product, the Ironbrook reports the order to the California Department, the Franchise Tax Board, and then the Franchise Tax Board bills us for that sales tax. We don't pay Ironbrook and then they pay it to the state. It kind of follows a different path because it's an international purchase.
It's like a use tax then, instead of a sales tax.
Yeah, I guess they want us to give the state the money rather than trying to chase down a company in Canada if the sales tax isn't paid. This will allow us to go ahead and make the replacements and substitutions on the UV system.
Move approval of item 10.
I'll second that motion, but I have a question also.
Mr. Curtis?
Is this order that you're putting in now going to give you spares, or is it just enough to fill the need at the present time?
Typically, we order enough to do the replacement and have a few spares. We don't operate with just exactly what we have, and we don't maintain a huge, large inventory of them just because we don't want to have issues with breakage or any kind of problems with lamps. But we do have a small stockpile of lamps and sleeves if something does happen or we need to go in and do a replacement on a one-by-one basis.
Sure. Well, that's the only point I was making, because I know there's lead time in getting those things when you order it. That's what I understood from
And we don't like doing substitutions in the middle because we don't maintain the individual life and hours on each individual bulb because there's so many bulbs. And so if we start doing swaps, then we'll have a bank with 15,000 and one lamp with 100 hours on it. Well, that's a waste of a bulb.
Oh, okay, good, that answered my question.
I have a question. Is there a shelf life on the spares that you keep around?
I'm not aware of any shelf life. I've never heard of any shelf life for those units.
I know, Jeff, at one time we had problems with ballasts on those. Are we still having ballast issues, or has that been all pretty much worked through?
We've pretty much worked through some of those. We replaced a bunch of ballasts and we replaced a bunch of power supplies we were having power surges on. We did have some problems after the fire because of the grit from the ash, and so we lost several of the power supplies and individual components in the cabinets after the fire. Those were replaced on a one-by-one basis, and those were actually paid for by FEMA as a fire. But I think we've worked through the overall problems with the systems. We still, and we're working through the shade solar issues. We still do have a heat issue in those cabinets in that afternoon sun, and so we're looking at putting up the solar panels to provide some shade. I think that will solve some of our heat problems.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, Brenda, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Aldrich?
Yes.
Mr. Curtis?
Yes.
Mr. Pelosi?
Yes.
Mr. Kaiser?
Yes.
Mr. Batterly?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
Yes. Moving on to item 11, annual investment policy resolution number 2019-2.
We have pretty much completed our transfer from Morgan Stanley to PFM. There are sort of two pieces to the transfer. One is PFM acts as the investment advisor, and they do the trading. U.S. Bank will hold all of the individual assets. In the old days, you used to get a piece of paper that was a treasury bill or a stock certificate. Well, they don't do those anymore. It's an electronic record, and you have to have a certified bank act as that holding agent. Well, U.S. Bank can do that for us. And so all of the individual assets have been moved over to U.S. Bank. PFM is doing sort of an audit of them, just making sure that they program them into their system correctly to begin trading on those. We expect that to happen probably within the next 30 days, that trading will resume in the new structure. One of the things we asked them to do was to go through our old investment policy and edit it and make it more correct and more in line with state law and trading guidelines, and so they have done that. This would then substitute the investment policy that we approved at our last meeting, but now we have a new one that's been up to date, so it's just a swap in and out. We've provided the, in a marked up form with the blue ink, the changes that have been made, so you can see the kinds of edits that PFM has done to that investment policy for our review and approval.
Okay, gentlemen, we need a motion for
Question.
Mr. Quilisi?
Thank you. I noticed that one of the things that they added under quarterly reports was a list of investment transactions. Was that something that Morgan Stanley was not doing?
We didn't get a specific transaction. We had a list of what we owned in each as a monthly statement from Morgan Stanley.
Compared to the last statement to
but
see
we
what
didn't-
happened?
We didn't have a comparative, so they will be doing that.
Okay, it sounds like sounds like something I'd want. All right.
Mr. Curtis?
There's a reference to general manager in that. Is that to our general manager or their general manager?
Where did you?
Paragraph 9.
The investment advisor.
That is our general, that is me. That if we give them directions, that they will then they will memorialize those and follow those directions. It's really, it is me, but it's actually you. If the board says we don't want to own Caterpillar, then I would relay that to PFM and say, you're directed not to buy or sell anything from Caterpillar. And so that would then modify the directions and their operating instructions.
It's what it's doing, it's clarifying you as liaison between the board and PFM.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Burt?
I'll move for 11A adoption.
Second. Motion and a second for 11A. Any further questions? Brenda, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Burt,
Yes.
Mr. Batterly,
Yes.
Mr. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Quilisi,
Yes.
Mr. Curtis,
Yes.
Mr. Ulrich,
Yes.
Mr. Stone.
Yes. On to item 12, mid-year financial report budget adjustment number 2019-25. Mr. Palmer.
This is our mid-year budget. This is the second year of a two-year budget. So this is a budget that was approved nearly 2 years ago. And as we've gone through and operated this now first 6 months of this second year budget, we're recommending some changes to that. I want to highlight a couple of those that have become numbers that I want to just talk about. Those issues are electrical issues and their retirement expenses. So 2 years ago, when we put together the budget, we budgeted basically what PERS and our actuarial calculations told us to budget for. And so our budget for the admin, the collection system, and the treatment plant were each based on that actuarial that was done prior to the 2-year budget adoption. What has happened since then is PERS has modified their expected rate of their investments. They've lowered their target from 7.5% rate of return to 7.25%. By lowering their expectation of what they're going to earn, transfers some of the burden back to us to make up that difference. And so the differences that you see here is purely that change of PERS making a more long-term conservative analysis of their estimated rate of returns. So we translated that into what our actual budget impacts would be. The second piece of some of the changes is electrical. When the plant was rebuilt in '96, the various pumps and motors were basically hardwired into the electrical system, meaning a pump would have a long pigtail from the pump up to the box, and that pigtail would be hardwired in a junction box in the electrical system. Our electrical system at the plant is incoming power is 3,000 volts and 2,000 amps. It steps down in the main switchgear to 480 volts, but that's some serious power. All of our panels that meet the OSHA designation for arc flash hazards have been labeled, and our guys are under strict orders that they don't go near or open any cabinet that is labeled for arc flash hazards. But that means in order to disconnect a motor that the operator must throw a breaker and go through lockout tagout procedures, put a lock on the breaker, and then they can go in the box and actually take off the wire nuts that connect the pigtail to the electrical system. As an extra layer of sort of electrical safety, we've taken the step of installing what are called Meltrix plugs. Rather than a pump motor being hardwired in with wire nuts, so to speak, in a junction box, there's a large blue cylindrical connector, and it's got a button on it, and it's got a twist lock, and then it pulls apart. Well, when you pull it apart and you push the button and you twist it, pins inside the connector retract inside the plastic housing. So if you're at your house and you pull out a plug out of the wall and your fingers sort of reach around the plug and you grab the two wires while you're unplugging the coffee maker from the wall, you get zapped. At the plant, 480 volt, 40 horsepower motors, you're not going to get zapped. You're going to be, if you're alive, you're going to be barely alive. And so these Meltrix plugs, they have retractable pins, so there's no way that an operator can sort of grab the plugs as they disconnect it. And so that allows the operators to take apart pumps and motors, disconnect them, and not have any risk of touching those prongs, touching those connectors. So we have been on a pretty serious effort to rewire all of our motors and pumps to include these Meltrix plugs so that we don't have the risk of someone grabbing a 480 volt, large amperage wire. I just think it's a conservative approach. I don't ever want to have us have an electrical safety problem at all. At those voltages and those amperages, there is no room for error. And so we have been doing this pretty seriously this last year, and so that's where the additional costs of the electrical system come from.
Question, Jeff. Does that plug nullify the lockout tagout procedure?
No.
It's still in effect?
We still do the lockout tagout.
Very good.
But just because you don't want to take a chance that something is crosswired something,
Sure.
it's just, there's no room for error at 480 volts. There's just none. And so we do follow complete lockout tagout, but we have this extra level of cautiousness in disconnecting things.
How large are those units?
Well, everyone is sized to the size of the motor, but the largest ones are maybe 3 inches or 4 inches in diameter, and they're probably 12 inches long, and it comes apart in the middle. But as you twist it, the pins retract inside, and it won't pull apart until those pins retract. So there's no way you can reach around and kind of, gee, it's stuck, maybe I'll just pull it.
Yeah.
You can't do it.
Are you having to find room to put those in? How
Yeah,
to
they're
get
not,
them in?
I mean, it's an extra piece, and then you got a little piece of a wire and a pigtail to wire it all in. So it takes up a little room out in the facility, but it's not, I mean, we do have room, but it's just something we make work.
Mr. Kaiser?
Jeff, thanks for bringing this to our attention. All it takes is 0.13 amps cause a human heart to go into fibrillation. So you can only imagine that, 480, 440 three-phase, what could happen to a human being with that type of high amperage. All of our staff, if they're working anywhere near that, they understand all the safety protocols, they understand, you know, the training aspects they've gone through, wearing the right kind of PPE around those types of, you know, equipment, correct?
Yeah, and like I said, they won't open any cabinets that are labeled for arc flash. We will not, we don't have anybody on staff who's a certified electrician. We only will bring in electricians that are certified in their high voltage stuff to come in if we do need to open some of those cabinets and do work on it. And as we go up in bigger and bigger cabinets, we get, you know, more and more expertise. About 2 or maybe 3 years ago, we went into the main switchgear at the plant, which is that 2,000 amp, 3,000 volt box, and they brought in a whole team of experts to do that. That's not even local electrician, oil field electric company. Our guys won't open them. If you look at videos of arc flash hazards, where you get a buildup of static electricity, or you get a dust, or you get an arc inside one of these cabinets, the explosive power of 480 volts or lots of amperage is, I mean, stunning. It will demolish, you know, a room and a cabinet and a person pretty
It
quick.
literally vaporizes anything that flies. I think it's a prudent measure, thank you.
Mr. Curtis?
One more question. Do you, when you're doing something like that, do you usually send 2 people?
It depends on the task. There's times when we have 2 people, one locking out the breaker and 2 people in visual contact or
Right.
phone contact with each other to lock out the breaker or communicate with the other person, let them know the breaker's locked out, so there's no electrical hazards when they're actually disconnecting the plug or, you know, doing some sort of maintenance on the equipment.
Any further questions? I believe we need a motion.
Move to approve, Andy.
Motion and a second. Brenda, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Mr. Baggerly?
Yes.
Mr. Kaiser?
Yes.
Mr. Quillisi?
Yes.
Mr. Curtis?
Yes.
Mr. Ulrich?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
Yes. Item 13, contract number 2019-01, design services WWTP fuel tank foundation project, budget adjustment 2019-26.
So we have one tank at the treatment plant. It is diesel and gas. By our permit, we are required to maintain 3 days of operating capacity in that diesel tank for the plant. That fuel burn rate assumes sort of a full load condition of the plant, which we're rarely at, just because we don't we don't have to run the generator at 100% load to run the plant. But the tank doesn't stay at full every day of every week of every month, because we have generator tests. We also use that fuel tank to fuel our large equipment in our trucks. And so there could be a scenario where it could be 3/4 full and a disaster could hit, and we would not have our 3 days worth of capacity, both for the treatment plant to operate and in the event we couldn't get fuel anywhere for our trucks, that our trucks wouldn't have fuel either. And that includes the generators in our remote pump stations. So by by adding an additional tank there, we will have added capacity to meet our operating requirements for the plant, as well as meet the operating needs of the trucks, and the fact that the tank just isn't 100% full every day. And so this allows us to meet both of those objectives.
Mr. Quillisi?
You just mentioned generators at remote locations. Presumably there are diesel tanks there as well. How do you get the fuel from this auxiliary tank or this combination of tanks at the main plant up there?
We have 3 of our pickup trucks have auxiliary tanks in the bed with those contractor tanks with the fuel dispensing nozzle in the truck. And so we were able to move fuel from the plant out to the
Remote
generators that
sites,
are
yeah.
on the collection
Okay.
system. One of the operating parameters before a storm is to make sure that the tanks are full at the collection system as well as those belly tanks are in the pickup truck.
Any further questions? Looking for a motion.
Move to approve.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Brenda, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Ulrich,
Yes.
Mr. Curtis,
Yes.
Mr. Colisi,
Yes.
Mr. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Baggerly,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Mr. Stone.
Yes.
Mr. Stone, one question. What's the capacity of that tank gonna be?
It's gonna match the existing, so we'll have a 6,000 diesel, and we're gonna add a 6,000 diesel plus we have a smaller unleaded regular gas for our gas vehicles.
Do you add the stabilizers to that fuel, because it's gonna set, has a chance to set?
We add stabilizers to them, and about every 3 years,
Every other year we have it,
No.
all 2 years.
they have a mobile rig that comes out, empties it, scrubs it, and gets rid of the water and any contaminants that might, get in the tank.
All right, moving on to item 14, signature authorizations, Bank of Sierra accounts. I guess this might be a Brenda thing.
Jeff can explain it.
So we have, every year, the banks require us to authorize certain people to sign on accounts and then to re-sign those signature cards every year. This is really a Homeland Security kind of practice that came into full force as one of the post 9/11 recommendations, actually. And so every year you have to provide your signature, go up to the bank and make sure that both the board has designated the board and staff as signatures, and you have to go to the bank and sign. So they make sure that it's you who's actually doing it.
Move to approve A, B, and C.
Second.
Motion and a second. Brenda, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Mr. Baggerly,
Yes.
Mr. Kaiser.
Yes.
Mr. Colisi,
Yes.
Mr. Curtis.
Yes.
Mr. Ulrich,
Yes.
Mr. Stone.
Yes. Moving on to item 15, California Special Districts Association Board of Directors nominations for seat B.
This is as a member of Special Districts Association, the board has a seat open for districts such as ourselves. If someone wants to be nominated from our board to run as a member of the CSDA Board Bylaws Committee, it would be one of your choice if you want to choose to ask for the nomination. The board can either nominate someone or not nominate someone, but if you did, it would be, that person would then run against everybody else who was nominated by other districts. So it's really a personal choice and then a board action if it's something you want to pursue. This particular board meets in Sacramento 4 to 5 times a year, and there's other requirements, so it does require you to do some travel. Those costs are borne by CSDA and OVSD, but so it's not a personal cost issue, but it is a pretty decent personal commitment in terms of time and travel.
Jack has served on this board in one of these seats, so he could tell you about it if anybody wants to know the time commitment.
Yeah, I spent 9 years doing that. And you fly out of Burbank, and you get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and drive down there and get on the airplane. And it's usually on Friday night, so you get home about 6 o'clock is when you get out there in the traffic, and it's bumper to bumper all the way out to That is,
Putting all the
You're not
positive
making
highlights.
You're not selling it.
those are the highlights. And it's more than 3 or 4 times a year that you go up there, I guarantee you.
Would you like to do it for a 10th year, Mr. Curtis?
It's tempting. Yeah, go ahead, let's see what happens. I need people to run anyway, I mean, you know, I'll throw my name in.
Jack,
Better you than me.
Huh?
Better you than me.
Better you than me.
Jack, it looks like you also get continuing education, because in the printer here it says that you're required to complete all 4 modules of the Special District Leadership Academy too.
I've done
He's
3
probably
of
done
them
all of them.
already.
So it looks like you get that 4th one then with this nomination.
Yes. I'll try to get it taken care of.
Do you need a motion?
We need a nomination.
Yes,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
a motion to,
I'll go ahead and make the motion and nominate Jack.
I'll second that.
Well, if anything else, it just looks like we're at least interested in something, you know, from the agency.
just a voice vote.
Okay, all in favor of Mr. Curtis as our nominee? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we will throw that name in the hat.
So this will come, all of the boards that nominate someone will be collated by CSDA. They'll come back out with a list of candidates that will include maybe Jack, you'll be lucky, you'll be the only guy nominated, and you'll get it unopposed. But most likely we'll get a slate of candidates from the other districts, and that'll come back to you for, you know, a confirmation vote.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. All right, moving on to item 16, sewer service rate discussion. Mr. Palmer.
So, the ordinance committee's met a couple of times, talking about rates. It's something that we have talked about from time to time at this board as different issues have arisen. And I thought it was time to maybe have at least a discussion with the whole board as we continue with the ordinance committee with the next steps as you see fit. Flat rate structure dates back to the 1920s when the city of Ojai, at least in our local area, when the city of Ojai was the oldest system in the valley. They had this index card system where they had the APN, and then sometimes they'd have an address, and then they'd have these little codes here, and sometimes there was other codes like E2 and 2I and all kinds of things. And when we consolidated in 1985, they gave us these boxes of cards, and we had no idea what they meant. And over time, staff, Brenda, deciphered these hieroglyphics into what they actually meant. But it was a flat rate system. And flat rates are used throughout the state of California, in many parts of the country, by a majority of sanitary districts, because it's really the only practical way in the old days, and even still today, that you can bill for sewer services. We don't, here in the Ojai Valley, there are 26 water districts, and a number of years ago, the state legislature decided that water usage data on the residential customer side was private. So we cannot, OVSD cannot demand from the 26 water districts how much water each customer is using. And with 26 water districts, it would be, you know, an astronomical cost to figure that out every month. We can't even get that data. Secondly, residential sewer meters, water wheel kind of meters, they're not accurate at all. So you can't use any kind of meters. We do use flow meters in main lines, primarily in the ultrasonic system, and I'll show you a picture of this. But in the larger diameter pipes, you can actually figure out how much water is flowing, but you can't in a lateral. So we utilize an equivalent residential unit billing system. a city that provides water service can, since the water use data already exists inside that city entity, and it's on one side of the hall in the water department, they're allowed legally to take that water data and move it to the other side of the hall to the sewer department and bill based on water use. So water use data is used, but primarily only cities. City of Ventura, City of Oxnard, they both use water usage-based systems. Now, there's a whole lot of assumptions in terms of how much water is actually returned to sewer, and it's not a pure, perfect mathematical system. But 2/3 of the state of California is not in cities; they're managed by sanitary districts. LA County, Orange County, San Diego, all the big agencies are all special districts, and they don't have water data, so we're not in any new territory. So on a water meter system, here's what a water meter typically looks like, and most houses have, a 3/4 inch or a 1 inch copper service from the main line. It goes through this little wheel system that's pretty accurate and not perfect, but fairly accurate. And so you can use this for water. You can't use this wheel kind of system for sewer because of everything that goes down a garbage disposal, water, banana peels and paper and everything else. It would just plug these up. So this completely can't be used for a sewer. Now in the larger diameter stuff, this is what's called a magnetic meter or a mag meter. We have a bunch of these at the plant. When water flows through a metal pipe, it creates an electromagnetic field. And so if you calibrate these right and you have a known pipe diameter and you have a good electronic module, under pressure you can figure out how much water is flowing through this piece of pipe here. So we have a number of these at the plant just to be able to track what's our influent, what's some of the flow through the filters.
In a gravity main, or is this?
That's in under pressure.
So it's a force main?
These are under pressure, these are force mains.
Do you have those on the pump stations also?
Yes. Now, here's a lateral.
Jeff, do I understand you right that that's what we need leads pressure?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, if you've ever seen someone use witching sticks, brass rods, out in the street,
Used to mow my lawn.
if you have water flowing through a metal pipe in the street, and you hold 2 brass rods in your hand, and you hold them loose, and you walk across a water line running parallel or perpendicular to you, those rods will turn when you're over the water line, because you can sense the electromagnetic field. I've seen Jim Stallings do this. He has a set of witching sticks or brass rods in his truck, and he would go out and find water lines that Golden State Water and other water districts in the valley couldn't find. He could find them, because it's not magic, it's physics. Here's a lateral. Here's what the house lateral looks like most of the time. It's empty. Occasionally when there's use in the house, there's a little bit of water, but you can see if there's just a little bit of water flowing down here in the bottom,